I've been climbing for quite a while now, but when I first started, I really thought it was just about how many pull-ups you can do, how strong you are, and that was about it. But as time progressed, I quickly realized that I was totally wrong. This is Yuki Kawamura. He's 5'8". He's Japanese. The Japanese team were known to be very good climbers, and that's why Yuki Kawamura
bounce took off. Phenomenal. Look at this step. Look at Yuki. Steps it back. Ray J. Dennis
on the court.
Steps into a three. Oh, yeah.
Let's try this again. This is Inho Yuya. He's 5'5". Japanese. Kind of heavy for a climber, but...
Inho snuggles in and gets that left hand inside, breaks Hirotoshi's balance, goes for another Statenage and...
Okay, let's try. This is Demetrius Johnson, aka Mighty Mouse. He's 5'3", not Japanese, and he looks like he would be a good climber.
Try to pick it up, Bill, adjust. Yes, go,
Okay, what I'm trying to say here is that climbing is all about using what you have to the fullest of its abilities. In basketball, while height and pure physicality does matter a lot, if you're good, you're good. In sumo, even if you're undersized and look like you're starving compared to your competitors, if you're good, you're good. In jiu-jitsu matches against guys that are just way bigger than you, if you're good, you're good. So when you can't keep your feet on the wall while you're climbing, it's not because you're too weak, you're too tall, you're too short, or you're too heavy. It's because when you suck, you suck. And so how do we go about and fix this? You just gotta use your goddamn feet. Look, I don't think I got the best footwork in the world, but I do know I'm pretty darn good. So let's go into what I think makes good footwork actually good footwork. It all begins by imagining that I'm 100 pounds to make numbers really simple, okay? In order for me to stay on the wall at any point in time, I need to exert at least about 100 pounds of force to counter out my body weight of 100 pounds. If I'm hanging on the wall with one arm, right now that arm is taking up 100 pounds. If I go ahead and I extend my other arm and grab onto the wall, now that 100 pounds is split 50-50 for easy numbers. When I lift up my leg and apply it onto the wall, because it's a leg and not another arm, the force distribution isn't 33.3 pounds per limb, it's more like 40 pounds per arm and 20 pounds for the leg. And while going from 50 pounds per arm to 40 pounds may not seem like a lot, it is huge. That's like losing 20 pounds all of a suddenly, or adding an additional 20 pounds to your max weighted pull-up. For some certain individuals, if you give them 20 pounds of assistance, they automatically can do a one-arm pull-up. That's how important the feet are. But we're not done yet. Here's why it really matters. Every single climb you do has a series of moves. And if, say, the climb has 8 moves, and if you mess up on all 8 moves by cutting your feet on every single move, you're now adding unnecessary poundage of force onto your arms. Over time, it's gonna add up really quickly, you're gonna get extremely fatigued, and then you fall off. And no matter who you are, nobody campuses harder than they can actually climb using their feet. And if for some odd reason this is you gotta learn how to use your feet more. Back to the example. If I go ahead and place on my other leg now, it's not as if this leg takes off another 20 pounds of force. It simply takes 10 pounds from the other leg distributing it. This example is just so that you could get a clear visual of how weight distribution works while you're climbing. Because in reality, the numbers are never this pretty. It's more like this, to be honest. The point is, you need to have at least 2 arms and 1 leg on the wall for the vast majority of your climbing experience in order to distribute the force throughout your body as evenly as possible to conserve the most amount of energy as possible while you're going ahead and climbing. Of course, climbing is complex and this situation may not be applicable all the time, but most of the times 3 limbs on is a good go at a minimum. Now that we understand that, look at this. Which position looks easier to hold? In both scenarios, both of these climbers are using the exact same 4 holds. And so I ask you, which one is easier to hold? Before you answer, take a look at this pull-up bar. Is it easier to hang like this, or is it easier to hang like this? Alrighty now, let's take a look at this again. I ask you one more time. Which one of these positions is easier to hold? If you for some odd reason said this one, just give up. If you said this one, congratulations, because this one is vastly much more easier to hold. With straighter arms, your weight is now within your skeleton. However, if you bend your arms, you are now applying more force onto the hold. And when you apply more force onto the hold, you take that force from somewhere, in this case, your feet. What was originally 40-40 in each arm and 10-10 per leg, when you go ahead and apply that bend, it now shifts to something more akin to 49-49 per arm and 1 and 1 per foot. The way I like to sum it up in one sentence is, the reason you can't keep your feet on the wall is because you keep pulling them off. It may be hard to see in this example because the feet still stay on, but let's use a slightly different one. Using a small foot chip, like a rather really small foot chip, this guy is in a pretty extended position while holding some pretty decent holds. Theoretically speaking, if you can climb V3, V4, you should be able to get into this position just fine. Right now, approximately 90% of his total weight is in his hands, and 10% is applying pressure onto this foothold. As his arms are extended and his body weight is low, he's able to actually apply some force onto the foothold to maintain his position. However, as he goes ahead and begins to put that force, that weight into his hands instead, slowly the amount of force on his feet gets lifted, and soon and eventually his body pops off. Here is another similar example, except the foothold this time is huge. His body is still kind of extended, and while he's nice low with straight arms, he's actually able to apply force onto the foothold. However, just like with the previous example, the second he begins to pull with his arms, tries to hold more pressure in his arms, that pressure is going to get taken off from his feet. Soon, this guy also gets popped off the wall. And the lesson here is, I already said it, but stop pulling yourself off of the wall. Instead, you have to lower your feet into the position and put actual weight into it. Of course, there's a little bit more to it than just that because climbing is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more 3D than that. And I simply like to simplify it using what's known as a triangle. These two climbers are going to do the exact same movement using their legs. It's going to be a horizontal push into the wall. One climber is in this low position with his arms extended and his torso relatively horizontal. The other climber is not in that position. His arms are bent and his torso is more vertical. Now here is the question. When these two climbers apply that horizontal push with their legs into the wall, which is at 40 degrees by the way, which one of these climbers will have an easier time holding the position? If you guessed this guy, good job. If you guessed this guy, try again. Due to the body positioning, the only way for this guy to actually leave the ground is if he goes ahead and applies force into his arms. And even when he does leave the ground, he's all bunched up and expending energy just holding the position, whereas the other guy is just straight up chilling. Allow me to draw it out so you guys can clearly see the triangle I'm talking about. The triangle consists of the 2 points of contact against the wall. And yes, I know there's 3 or 4 points of contact against the wall, but for simplicity's sake in 2D, making it look easy, we're just gonna say there's 2. We're gonna take those 2 points and connect them to the farthest point away from the wall. The more bigger, more bulbous, more equilateral the triangle is, the easier it will be to keep your feet against the wall. Whereas the more slim and small and narrow your triangle is, the more difficult it will be to keep your feet on the wall. Now, this isn't a catch-all phrase or catch-all formula because slab climbing exists, which is its own totally different beast. This is mostly for overhangs. Let's take this example for another example. He is on a pretty awful feet, but handholds are good. His body is extended, hips are down. And if we look at his triangle, it's kind of big, but on the right, this guy, his shoulder blades are contracted and his arms are squeezed backwards, making that triangle smaller. Also, he has to apply a good amount of tension into the foothold because now his body's not swinging into the wall, he's now directly pressing downwards. He is struggling to hold this position. It shouldn't come as a surprise that this guy is having a much easier time holding the position, whereas this guy is over here actively struggling. Since we got that all cleared up, hopefully we got that cleared up, there is one more key factor in order to use your feet quite good, and we call it applying force horizontally into the wall. In a sense, it's kind of like smearing. Instead of applying force downwards onto a hold, we want to apply it as almost near horizontal as much as possible. Here's why. When you're hanging and your feet are placed on the wall, that will naturally push your hips out just a little bit. Because your hips are pushed out, that means your chest, your torso, and your hips are not directly beneath your hands. Because gravity exists and your hands are now anchored in front of your body, that gravity is gonna force your hips to swing back beneath your hands, force your shoulders and your chest to swing back beneath your hands, which gives you the perfect opportunity to lift your leg up. And now instead of your hips and or your shoulders swinging beneath your hands, your foot now swings into the foothold or the wall in a smear. And in order to make that smear even better, we want to actively help promote it by pushing our feet directly into the wall as opposed to ruining that line of force and pushing it downwards. A lot of times this little camming action is quite subtle, but it is ever present all the time while you are climbing. But what about pushing down or toeing down on a foothold, you may ask? I am personally not a fan of that because it tends to lead to a lot of slippage and it directly kills the power of the smear. For example, both of these two climbers are going to do the same movement, except one is going to actively press down with their toe and the other one's going to actively smear into the foothold. Watch what happens and you tell me which one is which. Let's go ahead and watch it in slow-mo one more time. We see that one of them cut feet and one of them did not cut feet. Do you know which one was toeing down? And do you know which one was smearing? If you said the one on the left was toeing down, good job. If you said the one on the right was smearing, excellent. And now the question becomes, do you know why the guy on the left's foot popped when he went for the hold, whereas the guy on the right's foot did not? Let me explain. Because he's toeing down, that additional vertical force actually drove him higher by a few inches, kind of like he's jumping up a little bit. Consequently, it alleviates a little bit of weight from his feet. When he catches the jug, there's not enough weight in his feet, so he ultimately slips into a cut loose hold. The other guy though, throughout his entire movement, he focused purely on smearing into the foothold. As he went up, his body stayed low because he wasn't toeing down, he was pushing horizontally into the wall. And as he grabbed the jug, since there's still plenty of pressure in his foot throughout that consistent pushing throughout the motion, he maintained his feet pretty darn well. What I really like about these two examples is, unless you really know your climbing shit, it's really hard to tell what went wrong for one person and what went right for the other. It's not like this guy was stronger than this guy. And trust me, I would know because I'm that guy. Just in case you didn't figure that one out. They both have the exact same stats and yet one is just obviously better than the other. And now here comes the cool part. Imagine they weren't going for a jug but going for like a really bad hold. The guy who cut his feet would have no chance of holding the really small hold. Whereas the guy who managed to keep his feet on the whole time would have a vastly greater chance of actually holding the hold. It's the small details that adds up. And when enough small details adds up, sometimes you get climbers that aren't all that physically impressive, but they climb unusually hard. Again, not to say climbers aren't strong because some of them are just ridiculous. I'm not against cutting feet. In fact, cutting feet is one of the coolest things you can do in climbing. But for me, it definitely has to be a mandatory thing. And of course, since climbing is such a complex activity with many different angles, whole variety of movement, these things that I talk about in this video aren't always applicable for all scenarios. But given 99.9% of scenarios, that is exactly what I do when I go ahead and I use my feet. At the end of the day, you really got two choices. One, get good and climb hard things well because the harder you climb is pretty darn cool. Or the other choice where you just kind of refuse to get good, which I don't know why you would. Climbing hard is so much better.